Am I on?
No, it's circling.
Oh. I'm on? I'm on right now? I don't believe it. Am I really on?
Yeah, it's live.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 6 of Fireside Chats with Dave. Tonight, we are continuing our series into the history of golf in Western Pennsylvania. And tonight, we're going to be discussing the two international competitions that have been held in our area, the 1975 Ryder Cup and the 2002 Curtis Cup. Uh, for everybody who has missed our previous week's episodes, be sure to check our Facebook page and to check our YouTube page if you're interested in going back and learning about the previous installments of History of Golf in Western Pennsylvania. They are available on our YouTube and Facebook pages. As I said, tonight is chapter 6 of 9 total chapters on our history of golf in Western Pennsylvania. So we're 2/3 of the way done with this wonderful little program that we've been putting on every week. And let's jump right on into it and let's talk international competitions in Western Pennsylvania. So, as I mentioned, the two tournaments that we're going to discuss tonight are the Ryder Cup and the Curtis Cup. Now, for those of you that are not in the know as far as golf is concerned, let me first start by discussing what these two tournaments are. It'll make it much simpler down the road for your understanding in that manner. So, let's start with the Ryder Cup. The Ryder Cup is arguably one of the biggest tournaments in golf in the present day. It is a biennial tournament which is held every 2 years, which feats the best male professional golfers in America versus the best male professional golfers from continental Europe. And this event is conducted by the Professional Golfers Association, the PGA, and it was first contested all the way back in 1927. Now, the two sides take turns hosting the tournament every 2 years. So the USA hosts the Ryder Cup every 4 years. In fact, as long as the current pandemic doesn't postpone the event, it will be held this year on American soil in September. Now, the teams for the Ryder Cup are comprised of the 12 best American and 12 best continental European players, a captain, and usually some sort of vice captains and staff, usually 3 or 4 vice captains to help the captains out with their work. And the format of the tournament is 2 sessions of better ball, which is the best score amongst the team per hole, two 2 rounds of alternate shot, which means that the two players representing each side alternate their shots, and the lowest score on the hole wins. And then Sundays of these events are typically called the singles match, or are known for the singles matches, where all 12 players on the team face off against the other 12 players, and 12 points are up for grabs. So if the tournament is really close on going into Sunday, the singles matches always play a major factor. And even if there is a team way out in the lead, the singles matches often allow for dramatic comebacks, as we saw in 1999 when the U.S. came back at the Country Club, and in 2002 where Europe came back at Medina. Now, shifting to the Curtis Cup, the Curtis Cup is just like the Ryder Cup. It is hosted every 2 years, except this has the best women's amateur golfers from America against the best women's amateur golfers from Great Britain and Ireland only, not continental Europe. This event is conducted by a joint collaboration of the United States Golf Association, the USGA, and the Royal and Ancient, the RNA, the two governing bodies of golf in the United States and in Europe. And the first Curtis Cup was conducted in 1932. Now, very similar to the Ryder Cup, the U.S. hosts the event every 4 years, and the teams are comprised of 8 total players for each side and a captain and staff. And the format of the tournament are 2 rounds of better ball matches, so 3 matches in each round. Two rounds of alternate shots, so 3 alternate shot matches in each round, and then the quote unquote Sunday singles, where the 8 golfers face the other 8 golfers in the competition. So that's how these tournaments run. I just wanted to kind of go through that and give a little bit of an explanation. I'm not going to dive too deep into the details of these tournaments, the exact points of who made what and things like that. But I want you to have an understanding of how the Ryder Cup and the Curtis Cup and other cups like this tend to work. So let's focus on the 2 that have been hosted in Western Pennsylvania. So the very first one came in 1975 when the Ryder Cup for the very first time was contested in our area. It was the 21st time the Ryder Cup had been contested. And at this time in 1975, it was the best American professionals against the best Great Britain and Ireland professionals. Continental Europe as a whole, that we know the Ryder Cup of as today, didn't happen until 1979. So the Americans were highly favored, really from the 1940s onward when it comes to a Ryder Cup, until Continental Europe gets involved in 1979, and 1975 is no different. So as I mentioned, the 1975 Ryder Cup was contested in our area, and it was hosted by Laurel Valley Country Club in Ligonier. Now, Laurel Valley was opened in 1959, and the golf course was originally designed by Dick Wilson. Arnold Palmer later got involved with the course and completely redesigned it, and it is one of the premier country clubs in our region to this day. And it has hosted a number of major tournaments over the years, obviously the 1975 Ryder Cup, but in 1965 it hosted the PGA Championship, which was won by Dave Marr. In 1989 it hosted the U.S. Senior Open, which was won by Orville Moody. And then in 2005, it hosted the Senior PGA Championship, which was won by Mike Reed. Now, when it comes to the 2 teams that took to the course at Laurel Valley, the American team by far was the favorite. And that starts with their captain, who was none other than last week's topic and Latrobe native Arnold Palmer. Palmer was captaining his second Ryder Cup team after playing on basically every Ryder Cup team since 1961. This time he was a non-playing captain, and the team featured several other big names, which I'm sure you'll recognize, both from our previous weeks of doing these fireside chats, and if you have any interest in golf, you'll recognize some of these names. So for the American side, there was 18-time major champion and the 1962 U.S. Open champion at Oakmont, Jack Nicklaus, 2-time major champion and 1973 U.S. Open champion at Oakmont, Johnny Miller, who was a rookie featuring in his very first Ryder Cup in 1975. You had 6-time major winner Lee Trevino, 3-time major winner Billy Casper, and then you'd have several future Hall of Famers and future major champions in Tom Weiskopf, Raymond Floyd, and Hale Irwin, also featuring on the team. Now, for Great Britain and Ireland at this time, the team was captained by Englishman Bernard Hunt. And the team didn't really feature a lot of big-name stars on that team. When you think of the Ryder Cup today, especially for Europe, you're thinking of guys like Seve Ballesteros, Bernhard Langer, Colin Montgomery, Sergio Garcia, Rory McIlroy, Martin Keimer, John Rahm, some of the biggest names in golf. But at this time, it was a team of relative unknowns, except for really 2 players here in the States. The first was Tony Jacklin, who was a multiple major winner and actually qualified for the 1969 U.S. Open at Yakagani Country Club alongside Arnold Palmer. And then Peter Oosterhuis. Now, Peter wasn't a standout star player, though he won the Order of Merit in Europe several times and was a Player of the Year on the European Tour. But if you watched any of CBS's golf coverage, really in the last 2 decades, you would have heard the voice of Peter Oosterhuis. But he also featured on that 1975 team. And as I mentioned, the Americans were highly favored, and they really took control of the tournament from the word go. They won the first 4 matches that went out, and they ended up winning the tournament overall 21-11. And as I said, this would really this would be one of the last years for American domination in the Ryder Cup. After continental Europe got involved, it's really been a back and forth between the two sides, and as of late, Europe has really commanded the play when it comes to the Ryder Cup. But in 1975, the U.S. won 21-11 with Tom Weiskopf and Hale Irwin scoring the most points for the Americans. Hale Irwin scored 4.5, which was the most, leading the team, and Tom Weiskopf scored 4. And it was also Palmer's second win as a Ryder Cup captain. Again, he captained the team in 1963 when he also won, and it would also be the final time that he would captain the American Ryder Cup team. He would go on to captain the American President's Cup team in 1996, but never captain another American Ryder Cup team again. So that's the 1975 Ryder Cup. Now let's move forward to the 2002 Curtis Cup. Now, as I mentioned before, the Curtis Cup is the best women's amateurs from America versus the best women's amateurs from Great Britain and Ireland. And in 2002, it was the 32nd time that these matches were being conducted, and it was the very first time that they were held at Fox Chapel Golf Club. Now, we talked about Fox Chapel late in Chapter 1, so if you missed any of these chapters, especially Chapter 1, which discusses the foundations of all the major golf courses in our area, be sure to go back and watch that video. But for time's sake and for right now, Fox Chapel was designed by Seth Rayner in 1923 and opened for play in 1925. And before the 2002 Curtis Cup, it had hosted the 1965 U.S. Senior Amateur Championship, which was won by Robert Kursky. And then in 1985, it hosted the U.S. Women's Amateur Championship, which was won by Michiko Hattori of Japan. Now, the American team for the 2002 Curtis Cup was captained by Mary Budke and featured 7 rookies and one, for lack of a better term, legend when it comes to women's golf. Allegheny's own Carol Semple Thompson featured on the 2002 Curtis Cup team. She was 53 years old at the time, and it was her final appearance as a player in the Curtis Cup, and it was a record 12th appearance. And to this day, nobody really even comes close to Carol's record of appearances. And as I said, she was 53 years old at the time. She was the oldest member of the team. In fact, she was older than her captain at the time. The other 7 players on that U.S. Curtis Cup team were all between the ages of 20 and 22, and not a single one of them had appeared in the competition beforehand. Now, on the other side, the Great Britain and Ireland team, that was captained by England's Pam Betka, and that team had several veterans on it, along with a few rookies, and it was a much closer competition because of that. But the Americans would pull out the victory, winning an overall 11-7 being the final score. And who else would clinch the tournament for the Americans but our very own Carol Semple Thompson? Carol would sink a great putt on the 18th hole to win her match and clinch the Curtis Cup for the 3rd consecutive time for the United States team. And Carol, for that week, went 2-0 in her matches, which gave her a grand total of 18 career Curtis Cup match victories, which is the most all time. and the U.S. retained the cup. And Carroll would go on to captain the team twice in 2006 and 2008. And the hope is that we'll see these events back in our region soon. In fact, I believe the next Curtis Cup will be contested at the Inverness Club in Ohio. I highly recommend going out to see these team competitions. They're a lot of fun. If the Ryder Cup does in fact go on this fall, and hopefully with spectators, it is an absolute hoot. So I highly recommend, if you're going to watch a golf tournament this year, watch the Ryder Cup. It is just fantastic television. And that's it for this week. So I hope you guys learned a little something about international competitions in our backyard. The 1975 Ryder Cup, captained by our very own Arnold Palmer, and then the 2002 Curtis Cup, which was clinched by our very own Carroll Semple Thompson. As I mentioned before, please, if you've missed any of our previous videos, please watch them on our YouTube channel or here on our Facebook page. We will return next week with our 7th chapter in the history of golf in Western Pennsylvania, where we'll focus on notable characters that made an impact on our game in our region. And a sneak peek of some of the people that we'll be talking about. One of them will be W.C. Phones of Oakmont, and we'll certainly probably talk about Emil Dutch Leffler, who was a professional golfer, the superintendent at Oakmont Country Club, but also designed over 20 golf courses in our region, so he'll certainly be a focus as well. I hope everybody's staying safe and well. Our hope is that the center is going to be opening very, very soon. We're very hopeful that within the next few weeks that our doors will be open and you'll be able to come back in and see the work that we've been doing over the last 2.5, 3 months to really make the center an even better and more educational and fun place to visit. I want to thank you all for tuning in tonight. I hope you'll tune in again next week when we continue our fireside chats. I hope you all stay safe and well. Practice social distancing. We're doing well in this fight, and hopefully, if we continue to work hard together, we'll be back together even sooner. So, thank you all for tuning in tonight. Stay safe, stay well. We'll see you next week.